work hard just to get to a point where you're functional in this field, and then you want to enjoy that. You want to leverage that knowledge. You just want to be hitting on that, and then it gets to a point where other people now start coming along and challenging some of these kind of fundamental ideas, and that's where I've also try to catch myself to be like, okay, well, I have an opinion. I've formed it along the way, and it's well galvanized, and it served me well even. I've practiced it, and I know it works. But could it be better? Or is there a better idea at play? Or has the circumstances changed?
Welcome to the Forward Slash. I am your host, Aaron Chesney, with my lovely co-host, James Carmen, where we look into our crystal ball and try and decipher the future of IT. Today we have with us Daniel Silva.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
How about you start things off with telling us what got you into IT?
So my first experiences with computers were in elementary school, or kind of like middle school, programming a little triangle in the middle of a screen on like an Apple II computer, I think, if I recall correctly. And that was a lot of fun, just kind of getting into and learning very basic programming, basic as well. And yeah, that's kind of like how I got into it. Although it was kind of like an ebb and flow until a little bit later in life when I leaned in a little harder. But those are my first experiences. Yeah, getting into code.
And did you go to school for like college, or where how did you land ultimately here?
Yeah, so I don't have a typical kind of like computer science background. I don't have a computer science degree. I don't have a math degree. Um, kind of like in that kind of classical sense. I went to school and I thought I wanted to be an English teacher. I ended up getting a job as a tech writer for a software company, which back then is like, box software, put it on floppies, and, you had to write a bunch of manuals, right? And like the manuals were like a big bulk of what made up the software. And yeah, like I started kind of catching bugs. There was like this bug bounty program where if you tested in the software and reported issues with it, you would get, rewarded. And I was not in engineering, but I was like the top bug catcher. Like every month there was like a bug catcher of the month, and I was always it. And it was just kind of funny. So they kind of brought me in. At the same time, through a girl I was dating at the time. Her brother was a programmer and was teaching me and telling me, hey, like you could be a coder, you could be a programmer. And so kind of like mixed in with some of that mentorship along with some opportunities I got at that company. I went to QA. It's kind of like a QA analyst, catching bugs and testing and things like that. And then eventually I got a chance to actually write code. Kind of the C++ was the stack. And so, writing software there was yeah, like that was like the very kind of like where I really started leaning in, and I didn't really look back after that. um and yeah. Mhm.
It's kind of funny because I fell into a QA role kind of the same way. They were like, "Well, you're really good at breaking the software, so we're going to make you the head of QA." It's like, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's funny how it all comes together because I was really good at making broken software, so it's
Very good synergy there.
complementary. That yeah.
Yeah,
Now
yeah.
you mentioned something like that you don't feel like you were quote, I don't know if you said the phrase, but like classically trained for
Yeah.
this career. It's interesting because I don't, as we've talked to a lot of different people, I don't know if there is a classically trained. I mean, people would point to my background, probably going computer science, blah blah blah, but our industry's filled with all sorts of personalities, and it's really cool. I think that's a really neat aspect of our.
I think there's a lot of evolution too in the space.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of what you learn goes out of date, or but at the same time, I do think it can be fundamental. Like I have gone back, and while I would not say that I have the equivalent of what you might get in a like a 4-year undergrad degree, I have I've hit ceilings, right, where I've noticed that not understanding certain things, maybe it's the long running query, or it's the algorithm that, why is this taking 30 hours, right? Because I'm trying to, like, I don't know, loop over everything, in a very, like, but I'm blind to that in those moments, right? So I have run into situations where I've had to go back and ask myself, okay, why is that taking so long? Or what is the more optimal path? And that's where I have realized that those fundamental things that I missed could have been really useful along the way. Uh, but like, as you come across it, you kind of tackle that, and I think that the studies I did do prepared me in different ways. Maybe to tackle other types of problems peripheral to just the code that are just as important to, at the end of the day, delivering working software, right, to a customer. So I've always found that my particular set of skills is unique and fits well on a lot of teams. It's usually welcome, and yeah.
One of the things I find too is that a lot of those types of things, like the the organization of code to be optimal for running efficiently and that kind of thing, those are not the kinds of things that they teach in like a computer science program, course workload. It's more of something you learn on the job, and you usually have like somebody more senior, like an architect or a senior developer or something like that, that'll come in and go, oh, well, yeah, here's your problem. You've got like a bunch of complexity in here because you're, doing this full table scan, and then you're looping through it in, nested for loops, 6 times, and that's what's causing you your issues. Those types of things, I don't ever remember doing anything like that in my curriculum, um, when being trained. So I think, I think you hit on part of it with, say, it, and both of you kind of were talking to the same thing, is that there's a fundamental mindset, I think, for being a good developer, and it doesn't matter like where you got your training. Like one of the most uh far-reaching ones found was, I worked with a chemist that had her doctorate in chemistry and was uh, working as a programmer because she had to program her um, one of her like analysis tools, uh, and because she got used to that, she was solving problems with code and decided she liked that, so she moved into that vein. And it's more about, I think, the idea of problem solving and structuring logic than it is about um, anything else, because like you said, the technology changes frequently. You're constantly having to learn, and that's another probably base skill that you want to have, is being a constant learner, always looking
Yep.
at new things. Like James, how many days do you go without looking at a new technology?
Not many.
Right.
Not many, that's for sure.
He's always on the prowl for something new and juicy, or like an article or something to stir things up and where the change is coming from.
Yeah. Or even relearning things that we've learned along the way, right? So it's not even always just something new, or it's always something novel, but it could also be this idea of being open to, even once you've solved the problem once, just being open to the fact that it can probably be solved in different ways. And one of the things that, I've been doing this for, I've been in technology for almost 30 years now, which is wild. One of the things I've learned as I get older is how the incoming generation, how they are very opinionated and have a lot of ideas and thoughts that are slightly different, and I would even say improved over some of what I might consider cutting edge thinking, which maybe was galvanized, I don't know, like 10 years ago or 12 years ago. And right, like, I don't know if you guys can imagine that, where you work hard just to get to a point where you're functional in this field, and then you want to enjoy that, you want to leverage that knowledge, you just want to be hitting on that, and then it gets to a point where other people now start coming along and challenging some of these kind of fundamental ideas. And that's where I've also like, try to catch myself to be like, okay, well, I have an opinion. I've formed it along the way and it's well galvanized and it served me well even. I've practiced it and I know it works. But could it be better? Or is there a better idea at play? Or has the circumstances changed? Right? Like whether that's the technology itself, we have now cloud computing, we have containers, we have all of this really interesting stuff that has emerged over the last decade, as well as the people and the cultural norms and just what is expected. And it's just been very interesting to just kind of learn and observe. And but one thing's for sure, this field is so satisfying in that regard because it's very dynamic and there's a lot of different ways to connect um, one's expertise and experiences to a point of value to a customer, at least in the work we do, right? With being at Callibrity and being consultants. Um, so yeah, it's a lot of fun regardless, is what I'm trying. It's like part of it is applying and being valuable, and another part, maybe equally, is constantly learning and constantly observing and seeing something new and stretching in some way. And yeah, that keeps it. I hope that lasts, a very long time. Yep.
And I want to backtrack a little bit to some of the things you were saying about those galvanized ideas in that we have to. In one of the reasons that I like working with the young people that are just coming in, I like to call them the young guns, right? They come in guns ablazing, ready to prove themselves, and they have a fresh look at things because they're not mired down in tradition. And sometimes
Hmm.
those galvanized
Their
methods and
baggage.
principles, yeah, they become tradition, and we just go, it's I've always done it this way. I know it works this way, and sometimes we close ourselves off to stretching those boundaries to say, is there a new, better way to do it? And sometimes the young guns come in and they're like, why are you doing this? This is stupid, blah blah blah. And
Right.
sometimes you have to tone it down a little bit, and you're like, okay, wait, you might have something there, and then you get into that healthy conflict debate about, why certain things are the way they are, and then you sometimes come together and find a little bit better improvement on it. It's like I always say that software is never done, right? Because it's never
Exactly.
perfect, right? So
Yep.
It's an interesting, being a consultant most of my career, you learn those skills of fighting through those kind of, what Neil Ford calls the angry monkeys scenarios, where that's the way we've always done it and all that, right? So we have those, at least me. I don't want to project, but I have those reflexes, and that's kind of just built into the way I want to work with my clients. However, on a personal level, when somebody, as you're talking about, a young gun or someone that's coming in and challenging one of those galvanized ideas in my brain, I have to fight that urge. Like, I didn't used to fight it. I used to be like, "You're an idiot. What are you talking about?" You know what I mean? So I've grown. I would hope Aaron's probably seen me through some of that growth. I would guess he's probably smiling. But yeah, it's hard to kind of fight those, those urges, and I'm so conscious of it from when I'm trying to get people through that myself and help my clients. But you overlook it personally and you don't see it. So I'm starting to like, I do the same dang thing. Like, that's the way I've always done it, and I don't want to listen to anything new, but I have to like fight those urges. So that's an interesting aspect of being a consultant.
Yeah.
one of the things I've always when I walk into the room, I always assume I'm the dumbest person in the room. So that helps me glean the information and the knowledge of other people to try and make an informed decision. And because one of the things that somebody said to me once, um, that was a mentor in my development, was that intelligence is being able to learn from your mistakes, but wisdom is being able to learn from others' mistakes. And that's always kind of rung in my head. And I'm like, okay, well, what mistakes have you made, and how did you get past them? And it was like, maybe I can not repeat those mistakes and move forward without doing that.
Man, you opened yourself up to a joke.
Oh, did
Aaron.
I?
Yeah, you said you like to assume you're the dumbest person in the room when you
But he
walk in. I'm
probably
like,
is.
it's like
Yeah. No.
it's probably easier for some people to do that than others. I find it more difficult. It's probably just old hat for you, Aaron. I would guess. And I'm kidding. Completely kidding.
I I was gonna say how cool it is when you actually are.
It is. It really
Yes.
is.
Oh
Do
my
you know what I
gosh, it
mean?
is the
Because
best.
exactly, because I mean, if I can say this, I'm not chopped liver, right? Neither are you guys, right? Like, so being and walking into a room that's just full of a lot of brain power like that is, um, my biggest, when I think about my career working at and for Subway for 10 years was my biggest kind of like aha moment. Like I'm so grateful for that experience. Like that was the moment that I made a leap from being, say, a software engineer, senior software engineer who cared about their craft and wanted to do the best code and the best, to being a part of a team. So I stopped being not as much individual contribution as it was how can I support a team to do something. I learned about, hey, it isn't just about writing code, but it's also about deploying it, managing it, supporting it, evolving it. This is the first time I got a chance to work on a product that evolved. Like it wasn't just here's a task, now here's another task, now here's another task, but I got to learn how it tied to business outcome. In our case, we were doing credit card processing, so there were some very clear things we can look at, like is our settlement on the money? What is our transactions per second? What's our availability? Are we ensuring that the customer is able to pay for the product they're wanting to pay for in that moment? Um, I got exposure to the inner workings of how an application runs in an operational environment. And this was a little bit before public cloud infrastructure was fully trusted. So we're talking about data centers and how to set up data centers and what goes into a data center. What's a NAS, or what's a network switch or an ed switch, or what do you put in the meat in the middle cage in the, or what's an MPLS circuit, or like all of these things, um, that I got exposed to understanding, or the fact that not every service runs on the internet. Like in order to communicate with Visa, we needed a router in the data center that was given to us by Visa that was authorized to talk on the Visa network, and we needed to set all that up and get all that going. Um, it was just such a cool experience, and boy, was that this place. This was the I walk into the room and I am the dumbest one there, and it is amazing. It is this amazing feeling of like, oh my gosh, I am going to grow here by leaps and bounds. I'm going to learn some stuff. I'm going to see some things. Um, and yeah, it was a wonderful experience.
And you
That
said that you mentioned Subway, right? Like the sandwich
yes, the
Subway,
sandwich
right?
shop. Yep.
Oh, I was thinking of the trains.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, now I have a whole new appreciation for those sandwich artists. I didn't know you learned all those things as a sandwich artist at Subway. I had no
That's
idea.
right.
That's
That's
amazing.
right. That's right. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
no, really, so what was your role there? What did you what was your title? What did you do for Subway?
Yeah, so I started as a senior software engineer on this team, and little did I know that that would entail all of those things I just described. It was very much it was my first DevOps team in kind of like the most natural sense of the word, where the team was responsible both for the development of the software and also the operations of the software. We deployed our own software. We were on call for our software. It was like all of these things combined. And I was there for 10 years, from 2010 to 2020. And I started as, like I said, a senior software engineer, and then I played a lot of different roles throughout that decade. I was a product owner for a while, was a scrum master for a while. Um, I climbed the corporate ladder. Like in fact, my last posting on there was CIO of the franchisee organization portion of Subway. So Subway is a big org, and they have a lot of different. And I was heading up the technology side for for the franchisee org, which is amazing. Like there were two main things we did, which was payment processing, and the other thing we did, which I would argue is just as big, if not bigger, was supply chain. So how do we get food from farm to restaurant? How do you make sure that customers never turned away from what they want, but we also limit waste on the other side, which we would never waste anything. We would donate the food, but that was always the measure, right, of supply chain, like on time and just in time and all these kind of concepts. And yeah, it was I got to do a lot of that. Early on in my time at Subway, it was more interacting with an IDE. Later on, towards the end of my tenure there, it was more like interacting with board members and things like that. It became a very different role. Less about, say, just the outcomes of making sure a customer can pay for their sandwich, and more, how can we make sure that our franchisees are supported to do the business that they need to do, right? That our average store sales are where they need to be, that they're having a good experience with the different technologies in the restaurant, and that they're able to achieve all the different, whether it was marketing campaigns or different recipes for different sandwiches or whatever the case may be. Yeah, like a lot of work goes into that. Uh, considering how much food Subway does, I always found it almost miraculous that, you know, we wouldn't make people sick. Like a lot of effort goes into being able to put a good quality product on the plate, regardless of how you feel about the product. Like, not everyone's a fan of Subway, but nevertheless, objectively, we would always put a healthy, tasty, product on the plate for the customer. And at scale, that's not easy to achieve, and it was a fun to be a part of, and kind of supporting the solutions and solving those problems.
Food logistics is a fascinating area. I mean, I spoke with someone who worked for another large food company, McDonald's, and he was talking about like from the time they end of life the cow to when it makes it into a burger. Like they were measuring those things in like hours. I don't remember the number, but it was like when he said it, it like blew me away. Like, how in the world, how do you do that? But that it's just fascinating that has been so optimized like that.
Yeah, it's even a bigger deal when you consider things like, the freshness of the product is a big core tenet of Subway. Never frozen, vegetables prepped, they're good, they're fresh, they came from a farm not too long ago. uh, the proteins, they're sliced in the store, like all these kinds of things. um, yeah, it becomes even harder if you can get away with, like, freezing your stuff, and then, but it logistically, it's so much easier to move food around your network. But because it's fresh, and because of, plus we also had to support recalls, right? Because of things out of our control. Oh, like the the USDA will put out a notice, that says, hey, if you got lettuce from this batch from this area of the country, you've got to recall that stuff. And it was always very interesting problems, like, how do you isolate that one box or that one crate of lettuce in your, tons of lettuce in your system, so that you only take out the product you need, right? That's the limiting waste side of it, while optimizing and making sure that you're only delivering good, healthy, low risk product to the restaurant. um, yeah, it's a very interesting problem to solve. It's all solvable, though. Like, we had fun putting together solutions and working through that. Um, yeah,
Now I want to go eat a Subway. I feel like this
there you go.
episode brought to you by Subway.
Subway. Yeah,
I trying to mix in a cucumber joke in there somewhere, but I just that's about as
yeah,
good as I could get is the mention of it. Um, so so now that you've been kind of like at that C level of the uh, corporate exec level, and now you're back into development. How does that feel? Like, how does your day change in is it a happier thing, or are there parts that you miss?
yeah. I don't know that they. that they're comparable in that way. I think each job has some interesting and unique ways to be satisfying. The one really nice thing about being a developer is it's just easier to affect things. So when you're an executive, it is very much a more of a macro level thing, especially in a larger organization where policy decisions, and that's usually the place you play, right? You're not in the lower level making decisions about what your architecture should be. It's more like you're hiring the people that are doing those things, and you want to make sure you're hiring them well, and so your policies are more like you make a change and then you wait 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And that's when you start seeing repercussions, right? Do people start quitting on you? Not that I had that happen, but potentially, right? Or, you know, do are technologies on, like, are they on fire, right? Because of some decision you made 90 days ago. Very much more a macro level strategic role where the time is more spent on people and coaching and guiding people to execute. And as a developer, I don't have any of the people stuff anymore, right? I can just focus on a problem. Computers are much more rational than people. I think there's a joke in there somewhere, but like it's just so much easier to work with code than to work with people, right? Um, in at least in some ways. But yeah, like I'm enjoying it. A question I get a lot is like, do you feel you've been demoted or you've taken a demotion? I really do not view it that way. I think all of my uh, uh, all of the stuff I've worked on throughout my career has always built up and supported me for the next thing. And I think very much a lot of what I've gone through, even at the C level, has allowed me to get a greater appreciation for when I'm in that moment. Let's say I'm trying to write some code and then some agilist is coming at me and saying, hey, we're going to do PI planning next week. And I have such a depth of understanding of like what they're trying to do and what they're trying to achieve that it makes it even a little easier, I think, for me to participate in those conversations, to help steer a team, to be thinking about, hey, what are the outcomes that we're trying to drive as a part of our work? And I'm having a blast at the moment. Uh, at the same time, I do feel like, am I maximizing my potential? Like sometimes I feel like I'm not, but I think that as I get back into the code and as I, get better at that aspect of it, it's been a while. I've been day-to-day coding for about a year and a half now, and before that I hadn't been day-to-day coding since like 2015, 2016. So I had a huge hiatus outside of my little side projects on my GitHub account, personal GitHub account, but I had a huge hiatus from day-to-day just actively coding 20, 30 hours a week, you know and so getting back into it has allowed me to kind of feel that and get back into the groove and feel like I'm getting closer to fulfilling that potential on that side of it. But yeah, I like both. I think I'm an engineer that has a soft spot for people, and I've learned that that's a unique thing. I think a lot of engineers don't necessarily prefer. It's not that they don't like people, but they'd rather just spend more time in the code. And I do get a big kick out of mentoring, supporting, teaching, being a force multiplier rather than just a direct contributor. And thankfully, you don't need a title for that. You can just do that on a team, be a great teammate, be a great leader, and you can still kind of scratch that itch just being on a team. So yeah.
Yeah, we used to in our kind of like agile retros, we used to call the things that would slow you down, slow your velocity down, we would call drag. These are our drag items that were dragging us down. And then the on the flip side of that, the inverse of drag was lift, and having somebody that can mentor and teach and guide was providing lift to the team so that they could perform more efficiently. So yeah, it's always a good thing. I'm kind of the same way. I didn't get up as high in the corporate ladder as you did before I bump back down to developer. But a lot of those things that you've said resonate with a lot of the feelings I have from coming back down out of like product ownership and starting in the management track and all of that, with getting back into development and getting back to the ground floor of hands-on, getting your hands dirty, getting in there, fixing things, using your experiences to help mold younger developers, so that they can be the next force moving forward and driving change. And speaking of driving change, I have kind of an off-the-cuff question for you. What do you think the next big trend in software development will be?
Oh, probably like the one we're in the middle of right now with the large language models, and kind of mastering the predictive computing. I mean, I think that was already happening at the hardware level, right, with predictive branching, all that stuff at the CPU, and some of this is now becoming to come out. Um, uh, and if I had to guess, what comes after that is then probably the creative side. So I think a lot of the AI stuff is really good at mimicking, but I don't think we've yet seen like actual, like original thought come out of these ideas. And I do think that's coming. You could argue, no, that's not. Like that's just just like a limit to how computers are built, on binary and zeros and ones. There's only so much you can do with that. But I think it's coming. Now we might be like 6-7 years away from that, but first we're gonna master the predictive stuff. That the Gemini and the chatbot, ChatGPT, and all that stuff. Uh, Let me think. So I don't know. That also even feels a little vague to me, like as an answer. Um, uh, I think something else that's gonna move forward a little bit, even though it isn't as sexy as that, is kind of like the low-code platforms. AWS has one. I think it's called Amplify. I don't know if you guys have played with that, but it's amazing. Like you can put together like whole mobile apps, that are based on React, and um, with a lot of little effort. And when you couple, how the local tools are improving, along with how the predictive stuff is getting better, uh, I think it's going to be a really fun time for people who want to build technology but don't necessarily have all the kind of low level know-how, that they can piece together at least prototypes of stuff that could potentially then garner more attention, money, and then maybe you could build it properly, to scale and to high quality and things like that. But yeah, I don't know, like, yeah, so low code platforms, AI, like I think those are kind of like and then creative AI, if I can already call it that. But I think creative AI is something that's gonna not just taking input, but us being able actually to ask it a question, and it will think and give a creative answer back. Like I think that, um, yeah.
It's interesting. We human beings have an uncanny tendency to continue to raise the bar of what we value. So I wonder, that with the generative AI and all of that, happening right now, once that gets to a point of where it's accessible to everyone and everyone can do it, well, how do you differentiate? How do you become that special thing and provide a product that's special if everybody has the ability to write these pretty nice, apps or whatever? How do you differentiate? How do you make yourself stand out in the crowd and say, I'm better than the other people. I have a product that's better than everyone else. Something has to come along to raise that bar. I think that's what's going to happen.
Mm.
Eventually, there's got to be something, and that's the interesting thing to see what's going to step out and say, this is the way you're no longer just one of those lowly folks that's using these generative tools to develop these cookie cutter applications. I'm doing something special here. You should pay me more money. I think that's something that's going to be an interesting evolution here in the near future.
I think our roles are going to change. Like a common question that kind of comes along with this conversation is there a threat to the developer, or is is the developer job going to end, and things like that. And to me, I don't think of it in that way. I think of it more as in there's just going to be a shift, right? Um, there was a time when our job could be expressed as, well, I'm going to punch the cards and put them into the machine, and that was the extent of our work, right? And And then suddenly higher order programming languages came to be, and then we started working with those. And I think it's just going to continue to be the same way. I think uh, just like today, it's not so hard to go to your bookstore and pick up, I don't know, Learn Java in 21 Days book or something. Um, but just because it's accessible and easy doesn't mean everyone can do it, and it doesn't mean everybody is talented and gifted to know how to maximize that. And so I think it's going to continue to be that those that are gifted in this profession and are well suited to it. Like, I don't know if you had this when you were early on. When I first started to learn code, and I felt it was easy for me, I wanted everyone to learn it. I started getting everybody in it, like my peers, right? Like my core. I'm like, dude, forget what you're doing. You got to code. This is the future. And a lot of people would get the book or go through the lessons, and then they would walk away like, this isn't for me. I can't do this. And I was so confused. I'm like, how can you not do this? This is so easy. But then I started realizing that, wait a second, there is kind of like some unique qualities to this work that certain, I don't know, people gravitate to, and this is easier for some than others. And then I started just getting more of an appreciation for that. And I think it's going to be the same with this transition. Oh, in a transition it will be. And those that don't, are not open to changing, like we talked about earlier, I think they'll probably, maybe fall behind or suffer a little bit because, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could even take out all of the actual like typing of code. So if you use like a language like Scratch, where it's just you have like logic blocks that you're putting and plugging into place, and fitting them in like puzzle pieces, there's still people that struggle to structure their thoughts in a way that they can do that with those basic building blocks. So there's always going to be a spot for the people that can solve problems um, in that fashion, whether it gets as simple as, oh well, yeah, this is what I want to do, even if it was like, what do I put into an AI to have it spit out the correct solution for what I'm trying to do, type of thing.
Right.
um and it may evolve to that. It's like, it's kind of like, we joke about Google foo, right? Which is, how well you can manipulate the search engine to get the answer that you want out of the search engine without spending hours and hours and digging into pages and pages of this isn't it, this isn't it, this isn't it. And a lot of times I've helped fellow developers with, okay, what's the problem you're looking at? I do a quick Google search, and my Google is on par that day, and I find the answer for them real quick. Other times it's more complicated, and we have to dig in and find out what's going on. So I always think there's going to be a place for the developer mindset in one way or another, even if it means somebody's just having to tweak and adjust the positronic brain, right?
Yeah, I think what separates, in my opinion, good coders, of course it's my opinion because I'm saying it, good coders from bad coders is going to be the thing that separates coders from AI generated code, in the
Right.
future. So the thing that I think makes a good coder is being able to like pause yourself a little bit. Don't sit immediately down and clackety clack on the keyboard. Put the
Right.
wetware on it, right? Think about the problem. Ask the why. We get down to the essence of the problem and kind of model it and put the abstractions and think about what are the right abstractions to make the solution elegant. Once you have that abstraction, the framework, the model, however you want to phrase that, and then you ask the generative AI, so go write the code that embodies this model for me. That combination, I think, is going to be like the superpower. But I still think you need that ability to just dig into a problem and kind of get down to its essence. That's what separates the good coders from the not as good coders. I guess I don't think there's really any bad coders. I mean, there are. There's not
Uh,
very many bad coders. Yeah. Anyway, don't want to get elitist or anything, but so you've had a very interesting career. You've gone to the C level. You've individual contributor. You started as an exterminator, if you will, right?
Yep.
The chief
There you go.
exterminator of a company. What I mean, if do you look back on it? Are there any I have a few of these little incidents in my career, but you look back on um, your career. Was there any one conversation or something someone did for you, or a bit of advice that you got that had just that outsized impact on your career?
Yeah, I've 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 had a I've had a few. I've had a few. I'll share two of them. So so one was I'll try and be brief about this. So setting the stage, I'm in a meeting, and it's a meeting with high level executives. This is also at Subway, and I'm not yet at that level. Okay, so I'm a director, and I'm working with some others, and I had slaved away, kind of presenting or getting ready to present something very critical. We go into the meeting, we get to the part of the presentation. I'm super excited. Can't wait to present and to share what I've put together. And then uh, my boss at the time went ahead and took over and started to present and you know and show that. Now, all of that is kind of pretext. And of course, you can come up with your own. I mean, the way I've even set that up, you can already kind of imagine or like how I felt or like, but, just kind of these are complicated times and complicated situations. So don't be too harsh. I'm not presenting all the data, I'm just presenting the important, relevant stuff. But so when that happened, I took out my phone in the middle of the meeting and I fired off a bunch of text messages to my boss, sharing how very disappointed I was. Um, and then this leads to the conversation that 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 we had. Um, we He didn't acknowledge the text. We didn't talk right away. In fact, I'm pretty sure he downright ignored me for about a day. On the second day, he called me aside. And now I'm thinking, finally, we're going to talk about this problem. And he's going to acknowledge where he went wrong and all of this stuff. And he had a very stern message to me about how um, it was not cool what I did, and losing your emotional kind of balance is not good and not healthy. And there were a few things that I'll tell you, that conversation I was never the same. We did address the kind of the what I would call the more minor thing in the moment, right? Which was the presentation, all those kind of things. But the bigger picture here was that, up until that moment, I would say that I would classify myself as, hey, I was a victim of my emotions. I am who I am. I can never change it, and I am a hothead. And so being a hothead, that's just part of life, and that's just part of life and working with me. And that would always be a limiter for me. And that conversation, some of the things that I took away from it, he even shared a book to read called Emotional Intelligence 2.0. Changed my life. And I would even argue I would not have reached the levels that I reached within that organization had it not been for that moment, had it not been for that conversation, because I've learned a lot from that and from everything that kind of trickled down from that. So that was one conversation. And if I could share another one briefly, it was also while I was at Subway, it was during a happy hour where somebody from one of the adjacent teams just asked me, kind of like almost innocently, like, why are there no women on your team? Like, I'm just curious. And I didn't know, like, immediately how to respond because our team composition was not kind of viewed through a lens like that. But yeah, but she was asking a fair question because it's 18 men and no ladies. And the reason that conversation had an impact on me is because I had never thought about, like, literally, I had never thought about how it takes effort in order to find diversity when you're staffing groups, just because there's going to be natural imbalances in the supply pool, say, right? For whatever reasons. Like, and so there's deeper, things happening, and why are there more women in STEM and all those kinds of things. I think that's changing. I have 5 daughters, so I'm pushing them into these directions all the time. But I got to tell you, before that conversation, I never really thought about what resumes are we getting, and are we making an effort to plug into different trade groups, different that might have or might present more supply of talent, um, that we could potentially pull from, and and make a difference in that way. Um, it didn't have that conversation, and that question was a great conversation. We had a wonderful, it opened up my eyes tremendously, and it didn't have an immediate effect in that moment. But it had an impact later on when I was, like, for example, putting together my leadership team and things like that. And also, even like in my current team, it's like 50-50. It's like, half women, half men, as it so happens. I don't think it was by design or anything, but it is a technology group, and it is technologists. And so I have an appreciation for and can enjoy the fact that, hey, someone is putting effort to make sure that we're including as much diversity in the supply pool so we can give as much opportunity to different types of folks. And that is really cool. And I think I've benefited from it, greatly. Being from Miami, I'm from Miami, Florida, cosmopolitan, son of immigrants, Cuban immigrants. All we see is variety and diversity. It's like a natural thing, but the real world does not work like Miami at all. And so, kind of coming out of that, it was a little bit deep into my career, but I'm glad I had that conversation, because I've never really seen the world the same since. So it's just funny how these little conversations can have like you said it, James, like an outsized effect. What about you guys? Do you guys have any conversations?
I'm stuck on the thought of, like, last night I went to an event, and one of our icebreaker questions was, what advice would you give to your younger self? And you mentioned Emotional Intelligence 2.0, the book, right? My thing that I gave to my advice I would give to my younger self was, when someone takes the time to recommend a book to you, read it. Don't hesitate. Get it on your shelf and read that book, because there's a reason whether they saw something that you needed that book, or that it really resonated with them. Because I find myself, like, I'm a big reader these days. I wasn't as much back in the day, but now when I read a book and I'm like, oh yeah, my brother told me about this, or so and so told me about this book. Dang, I wish I would have read that 20 years ago when he told me.
Right,
Like,
right. I wish I'd read
yeah,
it sooner.
I keep coming across that. So yeah, that's super cool.
It's kind of like if somebody offers you a breath mint, you always take it.
For
Right.
some of the very same reasons, because
Right,
something you're doing is
exactly.
offensive, and maybe you need to read this book to not do that anymore.
That's good, Aaron.
One of the things that we like to close out our episodes with is the lightning round. We'll fire off a bunch of questions, just short answer, no explanation needed, and we'll fire off about 10 of these things to you, and just first answer that
Okay.
pops into your head. I'll
Okay, sounds good.
I'll start things off. If you could travel back in time, what period would you go to?
Oh, I don't know, the 80s.
Good answer. Stale Sour Patch Kids or fresh circus peanuts?
Fresh circus peanuts.
Would you want to live forever?
No, I don't think so. No.
What is the fastest speed you've ever driven in a car?
Like 120, something like that. I don't
Respectable.
know.
And this
Really
was
fast.
far enough back that the statute of limitations does apply here. So obviously, so there's no incriminating evidence here for you.
You got it.
Speaking of speed, how many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
I drink 2, 1 caffeinated, 1 decaf.
Have you ever tasted soap?
Yes. Yes. As a kid, mostly. Yeah.
If you were really hungry, would you eat a bug?
Yeah. 100%.
Any particular bug that you would prefer?
Grasshopper.
Yeah, I can see that being okay. Yeah. What does the acronym SCUBA stand for?
I don't know.
Fair.
Is that bad? I don't know.
I don't know. It's just a question.
Self-contained underwater breathing apparatus.
I should know that, but I didn't. Yeah. That's good.
Have you ever stolen anything?
Yes.
Again, statute of limitations do apply.
I was a kid. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was some He-Man stickers. I did give it back though.
All right.
Like my mom found them and she made me give them back.
Super Mario Brothers or Zelda?
Man, that's hard. That's hard. What are you
That's the
doing?
challenge.
I mean, we asked
question.
thought-provoking things here on the /.
Zelda,
All right.
but that's a hard decision.
Yep, that concludes our lightning round. I would like to thank you for participating in the podcast, in experiencing the lightning round with us. James, do you have any closing thoughts?
I do not. Nothing I can think of. We've already done a fantastic lightning round. I don't want to leave on a high note. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that. I get that.
Yeah.
Get while the getting's good. So with that, we will conclude this episode. Thank you to our guest, Daniel Silva. Thank you to my lovely co-host, James Carmen. And I'm Aaron Chesney. This is the /, where we lean into the future of IT. Join us for our next episode.
To the next episode. Yeah.
Let me say that one again. So be on the lookout for our next episode. There we go.